The judge's face went white as snow when I walked into that courtroom. His hands started shaking as he looked at the papers in front of him. Everyone thought they knew Rosa Martinez, just another old grandmother fighting for her home. But what they didn't know would change everything. If this story grabs your heart like it grabbed mine, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories. My name is Rosa, and I'm 69 years old. For most people, that means I should be sitting in a rocking chair, knitting sweaters, and waiting for my time to pass. But let me tell you something, age is just a number, and sometimes the biggest surprises come from the most ordinary places. Every morning for the past 20 years, I would wake up at 6 a.m. sharp. No alarm clock needed. My body just knew it was time. I would shuffle to my little kitchen in my fuzzy pink slippers, the ones with the hole near the big toe that I refused to throw away. They were a gift from my granddaughter Grace when she was just 5 years old. The first thing I always did was water my violets. These weren't just any flowers, they were special. Purple, pink, and white little faces that seemed to smile at me each morning. I had 12 pots lined up on my windowsill, each one perfectly placed to catch the morning sun. My husband Carlos had given me the first violet on our wedding day, 47 years ago. Rosa, he had said with that crooked smile I loved so much, these flowers are like love. Take care of them, and they'll bloom forever. Carlos was gone now, had been for 5 years. But those violets? They kept blooming, just like he promised. After watering my little friends, I would make my coffee in the same chipped blue mug I'd used for decades. The handle was cracked, and the paint was fading, but it fit my hands perfectly. Emma, my daughter, always said I should throw it away and get something new. But she didn't understand. Some things get more beautiful with age, not less. I lived in the same house where Emma grew up. A small, cozy place with creaky wooden floors and walls that held 45 years of memories. Every scratch on the door frame showed how tall Emma had grown each year. Every stain on the carpet told a story, like the grape juice spill from her 10th birthday party, or the muddy footprints from the day she brought home a stray puppy. For 45 years, I worked 3 jobs to give Emma everything she needed. I cleaned office buildings at night when she was sleeping. I baked cakes for neighbors during the day to earn extra money. I sewed clothes for other people's children so Emma could have new school uniforms. My hands were always busy, always working, always fighting to give her a better life than I had.
And it worked.
Emma grew up smart and strong. She went to college, got married, and had my beautiful granddaughter Grace. I was so proud of what she became. But somewhere along the way, something changed. It started when Emma married Rick 3 years ago. Rick was different. He wore expensive suits and talked about money all the time. He looked at my house like it was dirty, even though I scrubbed it clean every single day. When they visited, which wasn't very often, Rick would sit on my couch like he was afraid it might give him germs. "Mom, you really should update this place," Emma would say, but her voice wasn't kind anymore. It was cold, like she was talking to a stranger instead of the woman who raised her. The visits became shorter and shorter. Emma would call less and less. When Grace wanted to spend time with Grandma Rosa, suddenly there were always excuses. Ballet class, soccer practice, too much homework. But I kept waiting. I kept hoping. I kept believing that my Emma was still in there somewhere, buried under Rick's influence and the busy life she had built. Then came that gray October morning that changed everything. I was watering my violets, humming an old song Carlos used to sing, when I heard the car door slam outside. Too early for visitors, I thought. But then I saw Emma walking up my front steps, and my heart jumped with joy. Maybe she was coming for coffee like she used to when she was younger. But when I opened the door, Emma's face wasn't happy. It was serious, almost angry. Behind her stood Rick, checking his expensive watch like he had somewhere more important to be. "Mom, we need to talk," Emma said, pushing past me into my living room. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She just walked in like she owned the place. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "Let me make some coffee. I have those cookies you used to love, Dash." "We don't have time for that," Rick interrupted, his voice sharp and rude. "We have important business to discuss." Emma sat down on my old sofa, the same sofa where I used to read her bedtime stories, and pulled out some papers from her purse. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady and cold. "Mom," she said without looking at me, "we've found you a nice place to live. A retirement community called Sunset Gardens. It has everything you need, nurses, activities, people your own age." My world stopped spinning. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I whispered, still not understanding. Rick stepped forward, his smile fake and cruel. "What she means is that it's time for you to move out of this old house. You're getting too old to live alone. We're worried about your safety." "But this is my home," I said, my voice breaking. "This is where you grew up, Emma. Where your father and I dash." "That's exactly the problem," Rick said, looking around my living room like it disgusted him. "This place is falling apart. It's not safe for an elderly person. And honestly, it's not worth much in this condition." Emma finally looked at me, but her eyes were different. "Empty." "Mom, we've already put down a deposit at Sunset Gardens. They have a lovely room waiting for you. You can bring some of your things, the important stuff." "Some of my things?" I repeated, feeling like I was in a nightmare. "These are all my things. My memories, my life, my dash." "Your junk," Rick said with a laugh that made my skin crawl. "Look around, Rosa. Half the stuff should be in the garbage anyway." That's when I knew. This wasn't about my safety. This wasn't about caring for me. This was about something else entirely. Something that would turn my quiet, ordinary life into a battle I never saw coming. The woman they thought they knew was about to disappear forever. And what they would discover in her place would shock everyone, especially that judge who would later freeze in fear when he realized who was really standing in his courtroom. But first, I had to survive the worst betrayal of my life. Section 2. When family becomes the enemy. The next few days felt like living in a horror movie where the monsters wore familiar faces. Emma came back the following morning, but this time, she brought strangers with her. A man in a cheap suit carrying a clipboard, and a woman with cold eyes who kept taking pictures of everything in my house. "Mom, these are property appraisers," Emma said, not meeting my eyes. "They need to see the house to determine its value." "Value for what?" I asked, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Rick answered for her, his voice dripping with fake concern. "For the sale, of course. You'll need money for the retirement home, Rosa. We're just looking out for your future." I watched in horror as these strangers walked through my home, pointing at things and writing notes. The man knocked on my walls like he was checking for problems. The woman opened my closets and took pictures of the inside. "This wallpaper is definitely from the 1980s, the woman said with a disgusted look. "It'll all have to be stripped and replaced." "And look at this kitchen," the man added, running his finger along my clean countertop. "These cabinets are practically falling apart. The whole thing needs to be gutted." My hands were shaking as I listened to them tear apart my home with their words. These cabinets that Carlos had built with his own hands. This wallpaper that Emma and I had put up together when she was 16, laughing as we got paste in our hair. To them, it was just old junk. To me, it was my life. "The foundation looks solid," the man continued. "But honestly, this place needs so much work, I'm surprised anyone would want to buy it as is." Emma was nodding along like she agreed, with every cruel word. My own daughter, agreeing that the home where she learned to walk, to talk, to become the woman she was, meant nothing. "How much do you think we can get for it?" Rick asked, and I noticed he said "we," like he already owned MY house. "In this condition? Maybe $180,000. If you fix it up first, maybe $250,000. But that would cost at least $50,000 in renovations." I felt sick to my stomach. They were talking about selling my home, like I was already dead. "We'll take the lower price," Rick said quickly. "Rosa needs to move soon, and we don't have time for renovations." After the strangers left, I sat Emma down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework every night for 12 years. "Emma, sweetheart," I said, reaching for her hand. What's really happening here? This doesn't feel like caring. This feels like... She pulled her hand away. Like what, Mom? Like you're stealing from me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Emma's face went red, but not from shame, from anger. Stealing, she snapped. Mom, you're 69 years old. You can barely take care of yourself. What if you fall? What if you have a heart attack? What if dash? What if I'm happy? I interrupted. What if I want to stay in my own home until I die, like your father did? Rick jumped up from his chair. That's exactly the problem, Rosa. You're not thinking clearly anymore. That's why we've made these decisions for you. He pulled out a folder full of papers and spread them across my table. These are the transfer documents. You sign here, here, and here, and Emma becomes the owner of this house. Then she can sell it and use the money to pay for your care. I stared at the papers like they were poison. And what happens to the money after I die? Well, Rick said with that awful fake smile, whatever's left would naturally go to Emma. She is your only child. That's when I understood. This wasn't about my care at all. This was about money. Rick had looked at my little old house and seen dollar signs. He'd convinced Emma that taking everything I owned was somehow an act of love. I'm not signing anything, I said, pushing the papers away. Rick's fake smile disappeared. Rosa, you don't really have a choice here. If you won't sign voluntarily, we can have you declared mentally incompetent. Then Emma gets control anyway. You wouldn't, I whispered. Emma finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes broke my heart. My sweet little girl was gone. In her place sat a stranger who cared more about money than her own mother. Mom, it doesn't have to be hard, Emma said coldly. Just sign the papers. Move to Sunset Gardens. You'll be safe there. Safe from what? From living. Rick leaned forward, his voice turning threatening. Rosa, let me explain something to you. Emma and I have talked to a lawyer. We have witnesses who will testify that you're becoming forgetful, that you shouldn't be living alone. Your neighbors, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned that you sometimes forget to bring in your mail. Mrs. Patterson? The woman I'd helped during her divorce? Who I'd brought soup to when she was sick. She would lie about me? One time, I said. I forgot one time because I was in the hospital visiting Grace when she had her tonsils out. Doesn't matter, Rick continued. We have documentation. Medical records showing you've been to the doctor more often lately. Evidence that you're not capable of making these important decisions anymore. I felt trapped, like a mouse in a cage with two cats circling around me. But then something inside me, something that had been sleeping for too long, began to wake up. Get out, I said quietly. Mom, Emma started. Get out, I shouted, standing up so fast my chair fell over. Both of you, get out of my house right now. Rick's face turned ugly. Fine. But Rosa, you have 48 hours to think about this. Sign the papers, or we file the mental competency case on Monday. And trust me, you don't want to fight us in court. We have lawyers. We have money. We have everything. And what do I have? I asked, my voice breaking. Rick looked around my simple home with disgust. Nothing. You have nothing, Rosa. You're just a poor old woman with a falling down house and no one to help you. After they left, I sat in my kitchen and cried harder than I had since Carlos died. My own daughter was trying to steal everything from me. The man she married was treating me like garbage. And worst of all, they were using my love for them as a weapon against me. I looked around my home, at the pictures on the walls, the furniture Carlos and I had saved up to buy, the marks on the door frame showing Emma's growth. How could she throw all this away for money? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Rick had said. You have nothing. Was he right? Was I really just a powerless old woman with no way to fight back? I got up and made coffee in my chipped blue mug, the one Emma wanted me to throw away. As I sat there in the dark, surrounded by all my memories, I realized something important. Rick was wrong about one thing. I wasn't alone. Somewhere in this house, Carlos was still with me. And Carlos had always been smarter than people thought. Maybe, just maybe, he had left me something more than memories. Something that would wipe that cruel smile off Rick's face and show Emma who her mother really was. I just had to find it. The sun was starting to rise, and I had work to do. In 48 hours, they expected me to surrender everything. But Rosa Martinez had survived 69 years of life, raised a daughter alone after Carlos died, and fought for every good thing she'd ever had. If Rick and Emma wanted to fight, they were about to discover they'd picked the wrong grandmother to mess with. I started my search in Carlos's old desk in the basement. The wooden desk he'd found at a garage sale 30 years ago and fixed up himself. I hadn't touched it much since he died. It was too painful. But something deep in my heart told me to look there first. The desk had 4 drawers. The top 3 were full of old bills, Christmas cards, and photos of Emma growing up. Normal things that made my heart ache with memories. But the bottom drawer felt different when I pulled on it. It was locked. In all our years of marriage, Carlos had never locked anything from me. We shared everything: money, dreams, worries, hopes. Why would this one drawer be different? I searched everywhere for the key. Under the desk, in his old toolbox, even in the coffee cans where he used to hide spare change. Nothing. Then I remembered something Carlos used to say when Emma lost her toys. Rosa, mi amor, when you lose something important, look in the place that matters most to your heart. The place that mattered most to Carlos's heart was me. I went upstairs to our bedroom and opened my jewelry box, the small wooden one he'd made for our 10th anniversary. Inside, beneath my wedding ring and the pearl earrings Emma had given me for my birthday, was a tiny silver key I'd never noticed before. My hands were shaking as I walked back downstairs. What if the key didn't fit? What if I was just being a foolish old woman, seeing mysteries where there were none? But the key slid into the lock like it was meant to be there. Inside the drawer was a thick manila folder with "For my Rosa. Open only if you need to fight," written in Carlos's messy handwriting. My heart started beating so fast I thought it might jump out of my chest. I opened the folder and found papers. Lots and lots of papers. But these weren't normal papers. These were legal documents with official seals and signatures. Stock certificates, property deeds, investment records. And on top of everything was a letter in Carlos's handwriting. Asterisk, my dearest Rosa. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone and someone is trying to hurt you. I hope you never have to open this folder, but I know you, mi amor. You're stronger than anyone realizes, including yourself. For 40 years, while you thought I was just working at the factory, I was also investing. Every extra dollar, every bonus, every tax refund, I put it into stocks, into real estate, into our future. But I kept it secret because I wanted to surprise you when we got old. I wanted us to travel, to live comfortably, to never worry about money. Rosa, you are not poor. You are rich. Very, very rich. Look at the papers, my love. See what we built together while you weren't looking. Asterisk. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely turn the pages. But what I saw made me drop into Carlos's old chair with shock. Stock certificates for companies I'd heard of: Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Dozens of them bought years ago when they were cheap and now worth. I couldn't even count the zeros. Property deeds. Not just for our house, but for 12 other properties around the city. Apartment buildings. Office spaces. Even a small shopping center. Bank statements showing accounts I never knew existed. Accounts with more money than I'd ever imagined possible. And then I found something that made my heart stop. A property deed for 1247 Maple Street. The address looked familiar, but I couldn't remember why. Then I saw Emma's name written in my own handwriting on a piece of paper clipped to the deed. 1247 Maple Street was where Emma and Rick lived. Carlos owned their building, which meant I owned their building. I kept reading the letter with tears streaming down my face. Asterisk, the apartment building where Emma lives. I bought it 5 years ago as an investment. I never told her because I didn't want her to feel awkward about paying rent to her own family. But Rosa, this means you are her landlord. I also need to warn you about something. I never trusted Rick from the day Emma brought him home. Something about his eyes reminded me of the con men who used to come to the factory trying to sell us get-rich-quick schemes. I had a private investigator look into him. Rick has debts, Rosa.
Big debts.
Gambling debts. He owes dangerous people a lot of money. I think he married Emma because he thought our family had money hidden away. He's been waiting for me to die so he could get his hands on what he thinks we have. But he has no idea how much we really have. The lawyer's name is Mr. Jackson. His number is on the business card in this folder. If anyone ever tries to hurt you or take what's ours, call him immediately. He has copies of everything and instructions on what to do. Remember, my love, you are Rosa Martinez, and you are powerful. You raised our daughter to be strong. You worked 3 jobs to give her everything. You survived losing me and kept going. You can survive anything. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Don't let anyone steal your dignity or your home. Fight back with everything you have. I love you forever and always. Your Carlos asterisk. I sat in that basement for 2 hours, reading every single paper, learning about investments Carlos had made in my name, discovering that I own more property than I ever dreamed possible, realizing that the woman Rick called poor old Rosa was actually worth millions of dollars. But more than the money, I felt something else growing inside me, something that had been sleeping for too long. Anger. Pure, righteous, powerful anger. Rick had looked at me like I was garbage. He'd threatened me with lawyers and courts. He'd convinced my daughter that I was a helpless old woman who needed to be managed like a child. He tried to steal my home and my dignity. And all this time, I was richer than he could ever dream of being. I found Mr. Jackson's business card and called his number. A kind voice answered on the second ring. Mrs. Martinez, I've been wondering when I'd hear from you. Carlos told me to expect your call someday, though I hoped it would never be necessary. Mr. Jackson, I said, my voice steady and strong for the first time in days. I need to know exactly what I own and exactly what I can do with it. Of course. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? And Mrs. Martinez? Yes. Bring any documents or threats that anyone has given you recently. Carlos was very specific about what to do if someone tried to take advantage of you. That night, I didn't sleep, but it wasn't because I was worried anymore. I was planning. I made a list of everything I now knew I owned. I organized all the papers Carlos had left me. I even looked up Rick and Emma's apartment building online and discovered that as the owner, I could do things they never imagined. By morning, I had a plan that would change everything. Rosa Martinez, the poor old woman with nothing, was about to become the most dangerous person Rick had ever met. And Emma was about to learn that the mother she'd betrayed was also the woman who held her entire life in her hands. I had 24 hours left before Rick's deadline. 24 hours before they expected me to surrender everything like a defeated old lady. Instead, I was going to show them exactly who they'd been messing with. The war was about to begin, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I knew I was going to win. I spent the morning getting ready for the most important performance of my life. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one with tiny flowers that Carlos had bought me for our last anniversary. I fixed my hair and put on the pearl earrings Emma had given me when she still loved me. Then I called Emma. Mom, she sounded surprised. Are you ready to sign the papers? Rick has them all prepared. Yes, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice gentle and defeated. I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am too old to live alone. I could hear the relief in her voice. Oh, Mom, you're making the right choice. Rick will be so pleased. We can come over right now if you want. Actually, I said, I'd like to come to your place. I want to see where you live, maybe understand your life better before I give up mine. Emma was quiet for a moment. Okay, Mom. That's actually really sweet. Come over around 2 p.m. Rick should be back from his meeting by then. What Emma didn't know was that I'd already talked to Mr. Jackson that morning. He'd confirmed everything and more. Not only did I own their building, but Rick had been 3 months behind on rent. As the owner, I could evict them with just 3 days' notice. But I had bigger plans than that. At exactly 2 p.m., I knocked on the door of apartment 3B at 1247 Maple Street. My building. My property. My rules. Emma opened the door with a smile, the first real smile I'd seen from her in months.
Mom. Come in, come in.
I made coffee, the kind you like. Their apartment was beautiful. Expensive furniture, big TV, fancy decorations everywhere. All paid for with money they didn't have, while they tried to steal mine. Rick was sitting on a leather couch that probably cost more than most people's cars. He stood up when I entered, that fake smile plastered on his face again. Rosa, so glad you came to your senses. This is going to be so much better for everyone. I sat down in the chair across from them and accepted the coffee Emma offered. It was in a beautiful china cup, nothing like my chipped blue mug that they thought was trash. Before I sign anything, I said quietly, I need to ask you both something. Emma leaned forward, looking concerned. Of course, Mom. What is it? Do you remember when you were 7 years old and you wanted that expensive bike for Christmas? The red one with the white basket? Emma smiled at the memory. Of course. You worked so many extra hours to buy it for me. I remember you falling asleep at the kitchen table because you were so tired from cleaning offices all night. And do you remember what I told you that Christmas morning when you hugged me and said thank you? Emma's eyes got watery. You said that love isn't about what we have. It's about what we're willing to give up for each other. That's right, I nodded. I gave up sleep, comfort, and my own wants so you could have that bike. Because I loved you more than anything in the world. Rick was getting impatient. Rosa, this is very touching, but we have papers to sign. I turned to look at him, and for the first time, I let him see the fire in my eyes. Rick, how much do you think this apartment costs per month? He looked confused. What does that matter? Humor an old woman. How much? $2,500, he said with a shrug. Why? And how many months behind are you on rent? Rick's face went white. Emma looked confused, turning from him to me. What are you talking about, Mom? I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. But not the papers they expected me to sign. These were MY papers. The property deed with Rick and Emma's address on it. Emma, sweetheart, do you know who owns this building? She looked at Rick, then back at me. Some investment company, I think. Rick handles the rent. Actually, I said, placing the deed on their expensive coffee table. I do. The silence in that room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Emma stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. Rick's fake smile disappeared completely. That's impossible, Rick whispered. Carlos bought this building 5 years ago, which means for the past 3 years, you've been paying rent to MY family. Except you haven't been paying, have you, Rick? You're 3 months behind. Emma picked up the deed with shaking hands. Mom, is this real? Very real. And that's not all. I pulled out more papers. Stock certificates worth over $2 million. Property deeds for 12 buildings around the city. Bank statements showing accounts you never knew existed. Rick jumped up from the couch, his face red with anger. This is some kind of trick. Some kind of fake documents. Call the bank, I said calmly, sliding one of the statements across to him. Call the stock company. Call the property management office. Call anyone you want, Rick. They'll all tell you the same thing. Emma was crying now, staring at paper after paper showing just how wrong they'd been about everything. The woman you called poor old Rosa, I continued, the woman you said had nothing, is worth more than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. Rick started pacing, running his hands through his hair. This doesn't change anything. You still can't live alone. You still need care. Do I? I stood up, and suddenly I felt 10 feet tall. Let me tell you what I really need, Rick. I need my daughter back. I need the sweet girl who used to help me in the garden and tell me about her dreams. I need my granddaughter Grace to know her grandmother as someone strong and powerful, not as a victim. I turned to Emma, who was sobbing into her hands. And most of all, I need to understand how my own daughter could look at me, the woman who sacrificed everything for her, and decide I was worth nothing more than a spot in a retirement home. Emma looked up at me, with tears streaming down her face.
Mom,
Rick said. What did Rick say, sweetheart? He said you were getting confused. That you might hurt yourself. That we needed to protect you. She glanced at Rick, who was now staring out the window like he wanted to disappear. He said it was the loving thing to do. And what do you think now, Emma? Now that you know the truth. Emma stood up and walked toward me, her steps shaky and uncertain. I think I've been a terrible daughter. I think I let someone convince me that my mother, the strongest woman I know, was weak and helpless. She reached out and took my hands, the same hands Rick had called worthless just days before. Mom, can you ever forgive me? Before I could answer, Rick exploded. This is ridiculous, he shouted. So, what if she has some money? That doesn't change the fact that she's old and shouldn't be making financial decisions. Emma, don't let her manipulate you with these papers. Emma turned to look at her husband, and I saw something change in her face. Something powerful and angry. Manipulate me? She said quietly. Rick, who convinced me to put my mother in a home against her will. Who told me she was losing her mind. Who made me believe that stealing her house was an act of love. I was protecting our future, Rick yelled. Do you want to be poor forever?
Poor.
Emma laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Rick, my mother is a millionaire. We're the ones who are poor. We're behind on rent, maxed out on credit cards, and apparently, we owe money to some very dangerous people. Rick's face went completely pale. How did you? Emma, I can explain. Don't. Emma held up her hand. Just don't. I've heard enough lies. She turned back to me, and I saw my real daughter for the first time in months. Mom, what can I do? How can I make this right? I smiled at her, my first real smile in days. First, you can come home with me. Bring Grace. We have a lot of talking to do. And Rick? Emma asked, glancing at the man who had almost destroyed our family. I looked at Rick, cowering by the window, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger anymore.
Pity.
Rick has some phone calls to make. Starting with his gambling buddies, I suspect. He needs to figure out how he's going to pay his debts without stealing from old ladies. As Emma packed a bag for herself and Grace, Rick made one last desperate attempt. Rosa, you can't just throw me out. I have rights. I walked over to him and spoke in a voice so quiet and deadly that he actually stepped backward. Rick, you have exactly 72 hours to find somewhere else to live. After that, I'm evicting you from MY building. And if you ever come near my daughter or granddaughter again, you'll discover just how much power a rich old woman can have. The war wasn't over yet, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I was winning. And tomorrow, everyone else was going to find out exactly who Rosa Martinez really was. Section 5. Justice in the Courtroom. 3 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse wearing the same navy blue dress, the same pearl earrings, and carrying the same simple black purse. But everything else about me had changed. Rick had refused to accept defeat. After Emma left him and moved back home with Grace, he'd hired a lawyer and filed papers claiming I was mentally incompetent. He was demanding control over my finances and property, saying Emma was under my influence and couldn't make good decisions. What Rick didn't know was that Judge Harrison had been Carlos's friend for 30 years. They'd served together on the city council, played poker together every Thursday night, and Judge Harrison had been a pallbearer at Carlos's funeral. As I entered the courtroom, I saw Rick sitting at a table with his cheap lawyer, looking confident and smug. He thought he was about to win everything. He thought an old woman couldn't possibly outsmart him in court. Emma was sitting in the front row behind me, holding Grace's hand. My granddaughter was wearing her favorite yellow dress and had made me a card that morning that said, "Go Grandma Rosa," in crayon letters. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrison," the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison walked in, looking serious and professional in his black robes. But the moment his eyes found me sitting at the defendant's table, his face went completely white. His hands started shaking so badly that he dropped his gavel. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost, his mouth hanging open in shock. Mrs. Martinez?" he whispered, loud enough for the whole courtroom to hear. "Hello, Judge Harrison," I said with a gentle smile. "Thank you for seeing me today." The judge sat down heavily in his chair, still staring at me with wide eyes. Rick's lawyer looked confused by the judge's reaction, but Rick himself was starting to look worried. "Your Honor," Rick's lawyer said. "Is everything all right?" Judge Harrison took a deep breath and composed himself, but I could see his hands were still trembling slightly. "Mr. Peterson," the judge said to Rick's lawyer, "before we begin these proceedings, I need to ask you something. Do you know who your client is attempting to declare mentally incompetent?" Rick's lawyer shuffled his papers nervously. "Rosa Martinez, Your Honor. A 69-year-old woman whose family is concerned about her ability to make financial decisions." Judge Harrison let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. "Mr. Peterson, you're asking me to declare mentally incompetent the woman who donated the money to build the new children's wing at St. Mary's Hospital. The woman who endowed 3 scholarships at the community college. The woman who owns half the commercial real estate in the city." You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. Rick's face went from confident to confused to absolutely terrified in the space of 10 seconds. "Your Honor," Rick's lawyer stammered, "I think there's been some mistake. My client assured me that Mrs. Martinez was a woman of limited means dash." "Your client," Judge Harrison said, his voice getting louder and angrier, "is a fraud and a liar who has been trying to steal from one of the most respected philanthropists in this city." Judge Harrison stood up, pointing his finger at Rick like it was a weapon. "Ricardo Santos, you have some nerve coming into MY courtroom and trying to rob Rosa Martinez. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Rick tried to speak, but only squeaking sounds came out of his mouth. Judge Harrison continued, his voice filling the courtroom with righteous anger. "Mrs. Martinez, would you please stand?" I stood up, feeling proud and strong and powerful. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," Judge Harrison announced, "you are looking at a woman who has quietly donated over $500,000 to local charities, who has provided housing for dozens of families through her affordable rental properties, who has created jobs and supported this community for decades, all while asking for nothing in return." He turned to look directly at Rick, his eyes blazing with fury. "And this man, this gambling addict who owes money to half the bookies in the state, had the audacity to try to steal from her by manipulating her own daughter." Emma was crying happy tears in the front row. Grace was clapping her little hands and saying, "Yay, Grandma Rosa," loud enough for everyone to hear. Judge Harrison picked up Rick's petition and held it high in the air. "This case is dismissed," he declared, tearing the papers in half. "Not only is Mrs. Martinez completely competent, she's probably the smartest person in this courtroom." But he wasn't finished with Rick yet. "Furthermore, Mr. Santos, I'm ordering an investigation into your finances and your attempts to defraud Mrs. Martinez. You have 24 hours to vacate her property, and if you ever come near her or her family again, I'll hold you in contempt of court." Rick's lawyer was packing up his briefcase as fast as he could, clearly wanting to get as far away from this disaster as possible. Rick himself looked like he was going to be sick. "Your Honor," I said, standing up again, "if I may." "Of course, Mrs. Martinez. The floor is yours." I walked over to where Rick was slumped in his chair, looking defeated and pathetic. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for him. Almost. "Rick," I said quietly, so only he could hear me, "I want you to remember this moment. Remember what it felt like to underestimate someone because of their age, their appearance, or their kindness. Maybe it will make you a better man someday." Then I turned to address the whole courtroom. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I was just a poor old grandmother waiting to die. But sometimes life gives us challenges that reveal who we really are inside. I looked at Emma, who was smiling at me with so much love and pride that my heart felt like it might burst. I learned that it's never too late to fight for yourself. Never too late to stand up to bullies. Never too late to show people that being old doesn't mean being powerless. Judge Harrison was nodding along with every word, a huge smile on his face. "And I learned something else," I continued. "When you have more than you need, it's your responsibility to help others who are fighting the same battles." After the hearing, Emma, Grace, and I went home to MY House, the house that would never be sold, never be stolen, never be taken from me again. We made pancakes for dinner and sat on the floor playing board games, just like when Emma was little. But I wasn't finished with my new mission. The next month, I used part of my fortune to establish the Rosa Martinez Foundation for Women's Rights. We help women facing abuse, manipulation, or elder fraud. We provide lawyers, safe housing, and financial support to anyone who needs to fight back against people trying to steal their dignity. 6 months after that terrible October morning when Rick and Emma first tried to force me out of my home, I received an award from the Retired Judges Association for Outstanding Service to Community Justice. Judge Harrison presented the award personally. Rosa Martinez, he said at the ceremony, reminds us all that heroes don't always look the way we expect them to. Sometimes they look like sweet grandmothers watering violets in their kitchen windows. But when the moment comes to stand up for what's right, they reveal the incredible strength that was there all along. As I accepted that award, I thought about Carlos and how proud he would have been. I thought about all the women who had contacted our foundation, women who felt powerless and forgotten, just like I had. But mostly, I thought about Grace, who was sitting in the front row clapping and cheering for her super grandma Rosa. That little girl would grow up knowing that being underestimated can be a superpower. That kindness is not weakness. That you should never, ever judge someone by their age or appearance, because you might just be messing with someone who owns half the city. Rick moved out of state after the court hearing. Emma heard he was working at a gas station somewhere in Nevada, hopefully learning to be a better person. Emma herself had started volunteering at the foundation, helping other women recognize the signs of manipulation and abuse. And me? I still get up every morning at 6 a.m. to water my violets and drink coffee from my chipped blue mug. But now I also spend my days helping other women discover their own hidden strength. Because the truth is, we all have more power than we realize. We all have the ability to fight back, to stand up, to refuse to be treated badly just because someone thinks we won't defend ourselves. The judge froze when he saw me because he recognized someone who had quietly transformed from victim to victor. Someone who had turned betrayal into purpose and pain into power. And if my story has taught you anything, I hope it's this. Never underestimate the little old lady in the simple dress. She might just own the building you're standing in. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone strong in your own life, please like this video and share it with them. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories of courage and justice to light. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because everyone deserves to hear stories that remind them of their own hidden power. What's your favorite part of Rosa's incredible journey? Let us know in the comments below.